داشتیم خصوص توی این هوای گرم توی جلسه امروز تشریف آوردیم. من عمود عملی هستم، همکارم به زودی میرسه. امیر الان توی ترافیک گیر کرده. جلسه امروز ما دو قسمت خواهد بود. قسمت اولش به زبان انگلیسی خواهد بود در ارتباط با civil rights و human rights، به خصوص بعد از به قدرت رسیدن روحانی و به سرانجام رسیدن توافق جمهوری اسلامی با کشورهای غرب. و قسمت دومش به زبان فارسی خواهد بود در ارتباط با آینده فردای ایران بعد از رژیم جمهوری اسلامی و آلترناتیوهایی که جلوی جامعه موجود است. در قسمت اول قبل از اینکه وارد خود بحث بشیم به این مسئله اشاره بکنیم که we have systematic persecution of workers, women, youth and activists in Iran, including the arrest of union leaders and flogging of workers who were demanding their rights. It is estimated during Rouhani presidency at least 2,141 have been executed. The regime continues to arrest, torture different activists, including worker activists. In Canada, pro-regime and lobbyists, they are lobbying to re-establish diplomatic relationship and possible reopening the Islamic regime embassy. The first part of our program, we have Hasnيان. He is a well-known human rights activist with a focus on the Middle East and Iran. He is currently finishing his third year of law school. He works at International Human Rights Clinic in US and he's focusing on Syrian refugees. And the other speaker, Jehán نيرومند, he is an active member of Fight Backs and he's activist in worker rights. And we have Hasnيان and we have Jehán نيرومند in today's discussion. And we are very pleased to have and Jehán. Our program will start with Hasnيان. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. First of all, thank you and Zaya for inviting me to this event. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In limited time, and I'll try to be as terse as possible, in 10-15 minutes to give an overview of some of the happenings in Iran vis-a-vis the human rights situation. Because we were told that this signing of the nuclear deal would temper the regime's behavior, that by bringing them back into the family of nations, irrespective of their human rights abuses, that by engaging with the regime in talks and showing good faith dealings, that it would lead to a rapprochement and good relations with its neighbors and with the West. However, as many of you know, nothing in their rhetoric or behavior has shown that that will be the case. Instead, truly the opposite has occurred and continues to happen. The nuclear deal has emboldened the regime and has given them actually carte blanche to intervene in regional battles, to ramp up their executions, to go after labor activists, human rights groups and leaders, and anyone else who is deemed an enemy within the country, especially certain religious minorities. And why wouldn't they be emboldened? they've hardly given up anything in terms of this deal. They have already begun to replenish their hostages to be used as human pawns in later negotiations. And you have European and Western delegations that can't wait to prostrate themselves before the regime for these new windfall trade deals. And you see that with many of the visitors from Italy and Germany, Sweden, Austria, going to Iran and just basically jettisoning everything that they believe in to appease the mullahs so that they could secure a deal. And the danger of this is that whereas before they could talk in good faith about human rights in Iran, now they're actually a vested interest to go hand in hand with them for whatever is on their agenda. Because why would they jeopardize the sales of Maseratis, of Porsches, of Airbus and Boeing planes? Before, there was a modicum of concern for human rights, but now these transactions make clear that it is in the interest of these countries and their multinationals to ensure that the regime survives for the foreseeable future. And this wasn't certainly the case in 2009, where there was a very high chance of a regime change. But now, countries are just participants in this corrupt bargain. So quickly, just to begin, what has happened since the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that was signed on July 14, 2015. Once again, Iran has led the globe in the number of state-sanctioned executions, killing 1,084 people in 2015. That is the highest per capita execution rate in the world, exceeding China per capita, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, which are the other 2 and 3 on the list. Iran also remains one of the few nations to execute children and minors, as well as women claiming self-defense against rapists. Most of these individuals are hanged, often in public, slow, painful method by crane. The public nature of it is a overtly fascist mechanism. It makes the observer a participant. You are participating. When you're in the crowd, you are placing the rope, figuratively, on the victim's head. And it, of course, serves a warning to the rest of society. It makes brutality part and parcel of the culture. That's how Iranian culture has evolved into public executions, and it's part of it now. And frankly, it's no different than what ISIS does. They do public executions too. It's just a different method. They throw people off buildings, we hang them from a crane. It's kind of a distinction without a difference, in my opinion. Next, quickly, as I alluded to earlier, the hostage taking. The mullah regime has certainly replaced their coffers with fresh meat. Just the other day, I think yesterday, Robert Shahini, he's an American in San Diego, was arrested. And some of those allegations, which are unclear right now, include that he was criticizing Iran on Facebook. And this is something that's being used more and more. Observing people's behavior on social media and punishing them either directly when they land in Iran or punishing their family who live in Iran for what their relatives are doing in the West. This is basically enforcing Iranian law, the mullah's law, onto the world, wherever you are, because that's how interconnected we are now. The average arrest age is only 25. So these are all young people. These are the young people of the nation that are having their lives thrown away for what we do every second, and we take for granted because we live in freedom, comparatively. And in Canada, because I'm from the U.S., but I keep up on the Canadian happenings, and they just arrested the Canadian professor Homa Boutfar, who was just there for conducting research and studying women in Iran and so forth. But even if that's something that is a taboo, the fact is, you know, she's had her life taken away from her. I mean, people's lives are just taken from them. And it's an abduction on a national scale. There's so many others. I don't want to go through the list. I'm sure you know a lot of them. Siamak Namazi, Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, the British lady with Thomson Reuters who was in prison there. But just moving on to women generally. In April, as some of you may know, 7,000 undercover morality agents were sent on the streets to police women and men's behavior as well if their haircut is seen as too Western. I mean, this is a curious use of resources. Instead of figuring out how to best use the wealth of the nation, how to grow the economy, they're actually taking resources that have a negative purpose and create nothing for nothing. It's quite remarkable. But one effect of that, and it kind of shows the ingenuity and the intelligence of normal Iranians just on the street, the fact that, you know, here we have apps on our phone like Uber. You know, you want someone to pick us up, you know, just hit a button and someone shows up. It's great. And Iranians in Tehran have come up with an app called Gershad, which enables users in Iran to circumvent the morality police. So it's like kind of like the apps here when you want to avoid traffic tickets. They're using it to circumvent the morality police. And I mean, it's amazing. It just, again, goes to show their ingenuity and how their natural smarts are yearning to come out, and they're just constantly being knocked down by this regime. The other big issue with morality police is, of course, the bad hijab. And they've really ramped that up. They've now gone after women who are improperly veiled in cars. And they've equated that with driving recklessly. So, you know, here you could get a ticket for DUI, reckless driving, and if it was Iran, it would be a woman wearing a hijab improperly. Would be on the same level of crime, I suppose. It's really astounding. I was just wanting to read some tweets just based on this from people living in Iran who said, I wish we were living in a country where instead of undercover agents targeting morality, we have undercover agents targeting corruption of the officials. And I thought that was kind of neat. But one consequence of this invisible hand, these invisible agents that anyone can report on anyone, this is very detrimental to civil society. It makes people more untrustworthy of one another. It creates tension where there doesn't need to be tension. You know, you can suspect your friend or your neighbor to report on you for personal vendettas. It doesn't even have to be, you know, anyone can report for improper hijab and things like that. So, again, this is just part of the degradation of civil society that the mullahs have imposed on Iran. Other things quickly. Parliament passed a bill, Iranian Parliament passed a bill last Sunday allowing a man to marry his adopted daughter while she is as young as 13 years old. To me, this is legalized pedophilia. And how did this come about? It was to solve the issue, if it's even an issue, of hijab complications when a child is adopted, because an adopted daughter is expected to wear the hijab in front of her father, and a mother should wear it in front of her adopted son if he is old enough. So, I mean, what does that say? It says that these adopted children are potential sexual objects that need to be protected against. It's pathological sickness. It's depraved and unfortunate. Quickly, I have a couple minutes left, I guess. Religious groups are a big thing. The government of Iran has executed and detained and harassed members of religious minorities, as well as non-practicing Muslims or Muslims who practice faith that is not seen in line with the Shia supremacist agenda of the mullahs. There was one man on September 29th, authorities executed Mohsen Amir Aslani. This was actually in 2014 for making innovations in religion. So interpreting the holy books brings about the death penalty, even for better or for worse. Just having maybe a more positive spin on some verses can bring about death. And to begin with quickly with Christianity, for example, recently Mariam Negash Zangaran, she was a Christian prisoner. She's on leave for medical treatment, was forced to report back to prison. She's part of the whole thing that's completely verboten in Iran, which is evangelical Christianity. Mostly they don't have a problem with the pre-existing Armenian, Iranian population to continue, their traditions and such. But if a Muslim were to convert to Christianity, that is completely verboten, and death penalty is still on the books. And in her case, the actual charges were you converted from Islam to Christianity, and you try to establish a house church, etc., etc. And it's interesting because the court said that this was an agenda to spread Christianity in Iran in order to pervert Iranian society from Islam. And this is very insecure because, and there's another thing about this that's telling. They're speaking about Christianity as being this sole English and Israeli idea, like it's a new thing. When in fact Christianity has been practiced in Iran for over 2,000 years, almost from the inception. The second oldest church in Christendom is actually in Iran. It is the Assyrian Church of Mary in northwestern Iran. So again, it's an example of the mullahs redefining what it is to be Iranian, redefining Iranian history, everything through a Shia-centric prism. Despite the fact that Iran has been multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious from its beginning. And just moving on, Sunnis. Sunnis are 10 to 15% of the population, which is not a small number. And they are constantly harassed. They are in prison. There are over 1 million of them in Tehran, and not one Sunni mosque in the capital. I mean, that's, again, insecurity, suspicion. Instead of promoting the positive multicultural aspects of Iran, like in any other country, it's all looked at suspiciously through the Shia prism, through their interpretation of it. You let me know when I'm close on time. Okay. Take up too much. And on February 26, 20 Arab Iranians were arrested for converting from Shia Islam to Sunni Islam. And others have been arrested just for preaching. Much like Christianity, they're Sunni preachers, they're Christian preachers, and they're arrested just for evangelizing. The Baha'is next, who don't even preach, and I'll get to them now. They're the largest religious minority, and probably the one that is most in danger in the sense that their very existence is not legally recognized. In Iran, you have sort of protective laws for Christians and Jews, Zoroastrians. They all kind of have a place in society. But for Baha'is, they're completely anathema. It is like, they don't exist. And what's done to them? Well, there's economic pressures. Recently, they closed hundreds of Baha'i-owned shops. It was really a modern-day Kristallnacht, like in Nazi Germany. Smashing of windows, telling these people who worked their whole life, who had a business their whole life, that's where they got their livelihood. In 1 second, you don't have a livelihood anymore. And if they're really unlucky, they get sent to jail, which a lot of them have. Just on November 15th, 28 Baha'i-owned shops were closed in various cities. And it's really ironic that the mullah regime would have such animosity towards them because, you know, just researching Baha'is as a basic tenet of their faith, not just like, oh, do they believe in this? Like, one of the basic things they believe in is do not engage in politics. That's one of the main things, and respect the laws of the country you live in. If you live in Iran, respect the laws of Iran. If you live in Canada, respect the laws of Canada. So it's just purely for religious purposes that they do this. And you know, just to kind of wrap up, they've done the same to Kurds. They've done the same to the Arabs in Balochistan, and you know, I'll start to close right now and just say quickly that, end by saying that the effects of the nuclear deal vis-a-vis the human rights in Iran has actually given the regime a carte blanche to crack down on all these groups because they know now there are no repercussions. When the piece de resistance of Obama's administration is the nuclear deal, that is his great achievement. And he made clear that any opposition to it, any type of tampering with it is going to be vetoed and it's going to be a non-starter. So basically we are, as a U.S. citizen, I mean, it's said we are tacitly aiding and abetting their agenda. And whatever their agenda is in Syria, what they're doing, in Yemen, in Bahrain, we are now, we can say, hand in hand. And, you know, finally, just to say that, you know, a regime that bullies and imprisons people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, it's not a sign of power, but of weakness. And the harsher they crack down on these groups, the harder the regime will fall when their time comes. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Sorry about too long.
No, it's okay. Our next speaker is Jehon Neiroumend. As I said it before, he's from Fight Back, and he's well-known activist in workers' rights. Jehon, thank you so much.
Thank you. So yeah, I think usually I'm coming from universities. In terms of Fight Back, what we do, we kind of have discussion groups, and I think it would be nice to have like all you guys get into a discussion afterwards. I'm gonna stick to about 10-15 minutes. But thank you for giving that kind of outline of human rights violations in Iran. I think the fact that the Iranian regime is so brutal, has been so brutal since its inception in 1979, is not unknown to anyone. I think anyone in this room. I'm going to kind of give kind of an economic context to the nuclear deal, economic, social, and political context in terms of what are the implications of this deal today and moving forward in the future. You know, this deal is more, in terms of its significance, is actually, I would say, a sign of weakness in terms of the kind of the meddling of the West in terms of what they've been doing in the Middle East for the past 15 years. Just going off what Sam said in terms of Obama, but I want to go into that more later. To begin, today, 2016, we're 8 years into what's known as the Great Recession, signified by the IMF and the World Bank as a period of incredible turbulency. There's an unstable period. The OECD believes that there's not going to be any significant growth for at least the next 50 years. So this is kind of the world context that we're in. In terms of Iran being an emerging economy, I want to put it into kind of a global context. So given the fact that since 2007, 2008, you had the economic crash, Iran has felt the effects of this crash in much more extreme extent. The fact that the sanctions that began in 2005 made that happen. I mean, we saw skyrocketing in unemployment, massive increase in the rise of goods and services and food. So the general quality of life of Iranian people has gone down significantly. But even, I would say, even before the 2005 sanctions, you can say since the 1980s, you've seen more than 3 decades of economic and diplomatic pressure from the West, from the United States, Germany, etc., on the Iranian people. And I would say that it's the Iranian people that are suffering more in this game between the Islamic regime of Iran and the West. So I want to kind of make sure that we understand the forces at play here. We have, obviously, you have a ruling class in terms of the West, who's making deals with a ruling class inside Iran, which is signified by various forces. You can say them the hardliners, the moderates, etc. But it's important to understand the economic context, because that's when we'll begin to understand what are the implications of the deal. And so also another problem here is the fact that you have the oil crisis. A few years ago you had a massive drop in the production in the price of oil, from more than $100 a barrel to now down to $30, $40 a barrel. It's an unprecedented situation. And obviously Iran's main kind of economic foundation is oil production. And they've been squeezed by the sanctions for a long time. But the oil crisis itself affects countries like Iran, Venezuela, and the OPEC countries, Saudi Arabia, etc. Now the cause of this crisis and the cause of the crisis in oil has to do with the fact that the Great Recession, or the crisis in the economy itself, hasn't been able to solve the fundamental issues. The crisis in oil is a crisis of what a lot of the economists call overcapacity or overproduction. And the fact that there's so much oil that can't be sold, and so that the price is lowered. So it's important to understand this kind of economic context. But if we talk about kind of the role between the Iranian regime and the West, since maybe we can talk about the last 100 years, it's been a very up and down, unstable affair. Since 1979, you had the revolutionary movement, which was co-opted by, I would say, the Islamic regime. We've had kind of different forces taking the side of the regime. The United States especially has stepped up its diplomatic and economic pressure since the 1980s. But what you've seen is kind of the ruling classes of both the West and inside Iran. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't work together to suppress the movements. And the 80s was a very kind of brutal period in that led to that. And so, but kind of jumping forward into kind of now, the last, we can say, since the 2007-2008 recession, what have we seen in the Middle East in terms of the political context? What we've seen is, in Iran in 2009, you saw an expression of the anger that's within Iranian society. I mean, here you have a country of 80 million people in Iran. The majority are what you can term as working class. So people who sell their labor for a wage. And out of this majority, 90% of Iranian workers work low-wage, temporary, precarious jobs, and you have millions of people who are also unemployed. And there's no unionization. And one of the main demands of the workers' movement in Iran is for independent unions and independent organization. And so, kind of, what you saw in 2009, the Green Movement, was an expression of young people, students, and some workers, not very organized, come and express their frustration against the regime. And this was what you can say kind of a step forward in terms of what we're going to see in the future. After 2009, you saw the 2011 Arab revolutions. What started in Tunisia and sparked off into Egypt and the rest of the countries, where you had the overthrow of various dictatorships which had been in power for decades. And what this 2011 revolution represented was the fact that the economic crisis, which I talked about, pushes the tensions and the contradictions within each country to the fore. And so that creates a situation now where you can say every dictatorship in Iran, in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, all across the Middle East, is in danger of being overthrown by the economic crisis and the subsequent workers' movement. And Iran today, if we look at kind of the conditions, I think Sam went over kind of some of the human rights violations, but about 70% of the population is living either on or below the poverty line. 78% of Iranians are malnourished, and you have the majority, more than 55% of Iranians in the urban areas that are also below the poverty line. So 70% across the country, urban and rural, are below and under the poverty line. And in some instances, people are making 1/4 of the amount of money they need to make to just survive, to get the basic necessities of food, shelter, etc. And so this is the context that we're in. Now, you can say this was the context that we were actually in before the deal. Now that you have the deal, you have the same context of poverty, but in a new period. So what this means is, with the nuclear deal, you have an opening it up, a little bit of opening up of the markets. You're seeing kind of a massive amount of investment by the United States. Germany is quadrupling the amount of foreign direct investment they're putting into the country. And so you see all this money flowing in, but it's not going to the benefit of the majority of Iranians. The 70% that's on the poverty line is going straight into the pockets of the big industrial capitalists, the owners of the oil refineries, the oil factories, the metal companies, etc. And this money is being given to them so that they can decide what to do with the economy. Now, like I said, the crisis in oil is also affecting the way in which the big capitalists in Iran are able to put out the production. But even after this deal, I heard some people saying that this is going to create economic prosperity, it's going to improve the lives of Iranians as a whole. And I would disagree with this. I think that if you look at the logic of the way businesses are run under society, and you can talk about Canada, United States, or Iran itself, the point of running a factory or a business is so that you make as much profit as possible. And these big capitalists in Iran, what they're going to do with all this foreign direct investment is use that to make as much profit as they can in the short term and lower the wages of the workers. That's what's happening for the capitalists. But for average working class Iranians, what they're going to see in this period is that there's a lot of money coming into the country, but it's not going into their pockets. I mean, we can talk about more than 3 decades of the Islamic Republic of Iran using the United States as a scapegoat for a lot of the problems that's happening inside Iran. Anything that occurs, they say, okay, put aside your demands for better wages, demands for a better life, and join together to fight against the big, scary United States imperialists. The irony here is that while the Islamic Republic says this, they're actively working with the United States in some instances, and we can have a different discussion. I don't think I have enough time to go into it, but in terms of what's happening in the rest of the Middle East, like you saw the last 15 years, a bloody war in Iraq and Afghanistan, where up to between 1.2 and 2 million people have been killed. You saw kind of this destruction of various states and whipping up of Islamic fundamentalism. And the United States' traditional allies in Saudi Arabia, Turkey, etc., have found themselves in a very awkward position where the United States now depends on Iran's military power to stifle a lot of this Islamic fundamentalism, because it also affects Iran's foreign policy. So you have a very contradictory situation. You have the United States working with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and all these other countries which are opposed to Iran, while at the same time they're fighting each other. So it's this is kind of also one of the main reasons why the nuclear deal went ahead and got signed, is because the United States technically, in terms of military potential within the region, needs Iran's military might to fix the situation pretty much. I mean, without Iran, you can argue that Islamic fundamentalism in Iraq and Syria could blow up in a much more worse situation than it is now. But obviously, like there's a hypocritical nature in terms of the Iranian regime, which is they are as brutal in many instances as the Islamic fundamentalists. But we can go into that later. So you have the situation where the nuclear deal is benefiting the ruling class inside Iran and the West. And so what's happening within the workers' movement? So I'm just going to give a quick picture of that. So over the last
1 minute.
1 minute, okay, I'll do that real quick and go into discussion. So within the labor movement, we've seen an increase in strikes. You've seen in the mining sector, the teachers have gone on strike on a massive scale. They're asking for better wages, equal pay, equal rights, women's rights, release of political prisoners. And some of the main prominent leaders of this workers' movement have been jailed and now are getting a lot of publicity. And I think that this is the kind of signs of what's to come. We saw Vietnam, Ibrahim Zadeh, who got a 5-year prison sentence, actually a 7-year prison sentence. He's with the committee to pursue establishment of labor unions. You see Jafar Azim Zadeh, secretary of the board of directors of the Free Union of Iranian Workers, who just finished a 2-month hunger strike. And the charges thrown at these labor leaders are pretty much bundled into this idea that they're a threat to national security. They're a threat to national security because they're bringing workers together to fight for their rights. And this is kind of, I'll end it here, but I think this kind of shows you how scared the regime is in terms of what's developing within the labor movement. You have the deal coming into place, you have more money coming into the country, you have the United States now working with the regime openly, so they can't use them as a scapegoat. So we're into this situation where the workers are going to start demanding a lot more of the regime, and hopefully they can get much more organized. And that's, I think, what we can do here in Canada, for example. I'm a socialist, and I believe in fighting for workers' rights. And I think we should actively engage in pressuring, and not just pressuring labor unions here, but working within the movement to unite and efforts to fight both the ruling class capitalists here at home who are exploiting workers, and also the same people in Iran who are exploiting the workers as well. So I'll leave it there, and hopefully we can get the discussion. I know a lot of my friends, family here who have a lot of knowledge and experience in terms of the movement, and can give that to the discussion.
Thanks, Jahan. It was a very great presentation from Sam and Jahan. And right now we're going to open the floor. We have, unfortunately, only 10 minutes for the audience, and then 5 minutes for Jahan and Sam for closing up.
I have a question.
You can go to that mic.
Thank you guys. I really enjoyed both of your presentations. The question I have for you is, we don't see a lot of young people involved in Iranian politics. And I'm just wondering, what's your view? What do you think the Iranian political opposition can do to get more younger people involved? Because I think it's really important. And that's why I'm really glad that you guys are here today. And the other thing, it just came out of Jahan's presentation. You were talking about how all this money is coming into the country and it's only going to 30% of the elite and not to the people. And I'm wondering, what's your view on the sanctions, given the situation that the money is coming in, but it's certainly not going to the people either way?
We're going to get all the questions and comments, and then we're going to open to the speakers. Any other questions? I have one. I think both of you actually mentioned that right now the charges that the Islamic regime makes against the activists, it's that they are threatening the national security. And that's, it applies to workers' activists, it applies to women's rights activists, it applies to anybody. Even when the student graduated, they have party, the government arrests them, and even flogging them. And what is the charges? The charges is against national security. So how the activists can deal with it, and how we can actually push the Islamic regime back and deal with this. Any other questions? The other one, it is, what is the solution? Both of you talk about the situation for people in Iran when they want to actually organize. What is the consequences that they are facing? So what is the solution? How the activists and how whoever they are fighting in Iran, how they can deal with this? What is the solution that it's existing for those people in Iran? If there isn't any other question?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Firstly, thank you both for your valued opinions and for coming here today. My question is, what do you guys think about the impact of the arrests of dual nationals and Iran's diplomatic relations with other countries? How does that impact Iran's relations?
And the other question, this is actually for Sam. Sam was mentioning about Homahud Fire and some of those Canadian or from different countries that they have dual citizenship. When they go to Iran, they be arrested for whatever reason. What is the West response regarding this? Because at the end of the day, Homahud Fire is Canadian, Iranian Canadian, or the American or some other political prisoners which they have dual citizenship. When they go to Iran, they be arrested. What is the West position regarding this to put pressure on this? Well, if there isn't any other question, I just
فارسی سوال
بفهمم فارسی بفهمم
فارسی
ترجمه کنم یکی خودتون اوکی جهان جواب میده سلام از جواب جهان استفاده میکنم
اصلا باشید سخنگوی سخنگوی دستون در نکنه بحث من فقط مسئله حقوق بشری که ایشون داشتن رو مسائل اشتغال میزدن صحبت کردن حدوداً فهمیدم ببخشید من انگلیسی خوب نیست ولی تاریخچه حقوق بشر برسه تو جنبش حقوق بشری تو دنیا تا حدودی مطالعه دارم و میدونم و اصلا پیدایش حقوق بشر تو دنیا و اصلا بعد از جنگ سردی که وجود اومد سرمایه‌داری بین‌المللی اقدام به تأسیس به ایجادش کرد به خاطر اینکه بخش زیادی از جامعه رو بعد از جنگ سرد یک بحران عظیم فرو رفته دور خودشون جمع بکنن تا حدودی اقدامش انسانی بود و بخش زیادی رو دومش جمع شدن و یه جنبشی رو حداقل تو دهه قبل از اینش فعالیتی تو زمینه انسان‌دوستی و حمایت از به اصطلاح جنبش‌های تو دنیا بود برای نگه داشتن یه مقدار رعایت موازی که تو جهان دنیا بود. اما تو دهه اخیر ما می‌بینیم یک تقابل وسیع به وجود اومده. بنیانگذاران حقوق بشر اولین کسانی بودن که همین قوانین کوچیک هم که به وجود آوردن اقدام نقضش کردن و اونو از بین بردن. همین الان تا شما دنیا می‌بینید جنگ‌های وسیع که افتاده، آدمکشی و جنایتی که تو دنیا افتاده، اولین کسانی که اقدام کردن خود تأسیس کنندگان قوانین حقوق بشر تو دنیا بودند. نقض قوانین حقوق بشر همون کسایی اقدام انجام دادن که خودشون ایجادش کردن. همین الان شما تو دنیا می‌بینید.
من برای شما معذرت می‌خوام چون وقتمون محدوده.
ما وقتم نمی‌بینم اینجا که مثلا دیوار بگو. فقط سوال این بود که وفاداری همین الان دوستانی که تو مسئله حقوق بشر وفاداریشون که چقدر به این مسائل حقوق بشری است که میتونه جوابگو بشه. فقط بحثش این نیست که یک طرف قضیه نقضش کرده، اون برای قضیه هم دیگه جواب نمیده مسائل حقوق بشر بهش. نمیتونه که پابش بده. و همین اساس این برای قضیه هم جوابی بشری هم دنیای آزادی خواهی، دنیای برابری طلبی الان جوابش نمیده مسئله حقوق بشر. آیا فکر میکنن کما فی سابق میتونه جوابگو بشه جنبش‌های وسیع که دنیا آورده و بهش وفادارن یا نه؟
Okay, no more questions or comments, and right now it's open to the panelists to respond. Whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, so I think the first question was how do we get young people to get involved and what's to get to move, pretty much. I think if you look at young people in Iran, if you look at the young people in terms of the movement that happened, even in the last several decades, I mean, I'll talk about 2009, but young people are usually the first to enter the scene in terms of, they're most sensitive to society. Like if you look at even the past few years, there has been movements within the universities, very brave movements against demands of the regime, in terms of like the laws of the regime, in terms of how they govern and how they suppress their day-to-day lives. I think Sam kind of went into that a bit. But how do we get them involved? I think regardless, the youth will enter the scene, but the key thing that the youth need to do is connect their demands for democratic rights and freedoms with the workers' movement. And I think this is a fundamental issue to touch on one other question in terms of what is needed, what is the solution. I think the solution is an organized leadership that can unite the labor movement with the youth movements, which are actually occurring, and do that in a very organized way. And the reason why I say that is that I think the labor movement has the actual power within society. Like when the oil refining workers or the teachers go on strike, they shut down a significant part of the economy, right? But I think also a lot of young people are very frustrated. They don't know, what they see in the elections in 2009, in 2013 with Rohani, in 2016 with the parliamentary elections. They don't see an outlet. They just see how they can express themselves within the status quo. So they express themselves through Rohani. They express themselves through the more moderate side of the regime. They use that movement to express their own demands. But what we need is a leadership that comes out of the labor movement and has a perspective that splits away with the regime, the Islamic regime, and directs the movement in a much more united way.
In terms of the silence for people who have been taken hostage, like Kuma, Ufar, and others, the question is like, what do we do? What are the world leaders going to do about that? And it's my strong contention that they will do absolutely nothing. How do we respond to every terrorist attack these days, which are almost on a daily basis now? We hold up signs, we change our Facebook profile picture to whatever country's color, we change the colors of our buildings, we pray, our world leaders will give condolences, and these are for major attacks. So the idea that someone who was Canadian or American who went to Iran and is taken prisoner and goes to Evin prison and is never heard from again, that could just be the logical outcome. I mean, I'm very pessimistic in that way. The only thing I would see that would change that is, again, when Iran feels the need to use these human pawns as capital in their next round of negotiations. And that could be next year, it could be a couple of years, it could be 10 years. And this human pawn will be languishing in jail. And you'll hear about it here and there, but honestly, when I said that, when the nuclear deal was Obama's piece de resistance for his administration, even more than healthcare. And he really believes that. And that does mean that human rights, or enacting substantive changes for human rights, will always be placed on the back burner. It's just not going to be a big issue, in my opinion.
Thank you. Well, we have only, first of all, I'm apologizing because then I saw that some people they wanted to make some comments or question, but because we don't have enough time, especially for the second part, and we have 3 speakers, that's why we have to make this. And
So my second question.
yes. So we have 5 minutes for this section.
So less than 5 minutes, we do have less than 5 minutes.
All right, let's go for 5 minutes. Okay, so 2 minutes and a half each of you guys. I really apologize.
No worries. So yeah, the second part of your question was the money in terms of the view on the sanctions, and it's not going to the people. I'm going to connect that with what we need in terms of a solution with, I think, Mahmoud talked about the accusations of national security, crimes of national security, etc. Like I said before, the money is going straight into the pockets of the big industrialists and big capitalists within Iran. And the sanctions, I think it's good that the sanctions were lifted because that gives room to the Iranian people who are the ones who are actually suffering. I mean, the billionaires and the millionaires within Iran, they may be suffering in terms of their profits and their political position, but they're not suffering as much as the average Iranian family who can't even afford bread or meat, etc. Right? So the sanctions lifts Iranians a little bit in terms of what they fight for. Because let's remember, the government, the Islamic regime is not going to give just things to people for free. The workers and the youth will have to fight for that. Well, and what we're going to see in the next period, I think, after this deal, is we're going to see escalation of the workers' movement because all this money coming in, $100 billion was just unfrozen overnight. You have billions of dollars being invested now, and the people are going to ask, where is this money going? Why are you cutting our wages when you have all this money? Why are you living in these mansions? Why are you living in these, why do you have these luxuries while we're suffering? And so you're going to see kind of an escalation of this movement on the part of not just the youth but also the workers. And just to add to kind of where the movement needs to go, I think the movement, I think what my brother asked there. One minute, yeah, at least good. I don't believe that you can simply pressure the government in terms of following the legal route. Like there's been a lot of demands on the International Labour Organization. There's been a lot of demands to the United Nations. But at the end of the day, the United Nations, for example, represents the interests of the big countries, the United States, China, Russia, and etc. So what we have to do here in Canada and across the world is in support of the Iranian people. I think I come from a family that came through the 1979 revolution, etc. I think we need to organize ourselves and fight for demands that go beyond just the legal route or the basic wages demands, but connect the wages, connect the demands for better wages, for more democratic freedoms, for equality to an abolishment of the economic system itself within the country and elsewhere. I think this is possible through this perspective will be successful if the leadership of the labor movement inside Iran adopts it. And I think a lot of the veterans of the 1979 revolution are there. But I'll just, one last thing, really that's it. I think the resurgence is there, and I think it's coming, pretty much in terms of revolution movement.
Well, thank you so much, Jahan and Sam. It was such a great discussion, and we're really happy to have you here as a panelist in the show.